The morning sun beat down over the Arizona desert, turning the landscape into a golden mirage of heat and dust. The sound of gunfire echoed off distant ridges as teams of soldiers took turns on the range. This wasn't just any shooting range. It was a restricted military site where Delta Force operatives trained alongside select Army recruits for the annual precision marksmanship trials. Only the best shooters got invited, and among them stood a young woman who looked like she didn't belong there. Her name tag read Morgan, a name no one recognized. She was small-framed, quiet, and stood slightly apart from the rest of the group, her eyes hidden behind reflective shooting glasses. She didn't talk much, didn't laugh at the rough jokes being thrown around by the veterans, and didn't seem impressed by the bragging that filled the desert air. Most assumed she was just another rookie, trying her luck at something far beyond her skill level. Major Cole Ramirez, the commanding officer overseeing the trial, had seen hundreds of recruits in his career. Some were cocky, some terrified, but all of them had that nervous edge when standing near Delta operators. He noticed Ava immediately, not for her looks or attitude, but for her composure. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't even breathing heavily under the scorching heat. She just watched, silent and still, as if she'd seen this before, 1,000 times before. Ramirez stepped closer, arms folded, studying her stance. "Private Morgan, right?" he asked. "Yes, sir. You here to observe or to shoot?" Ava didn't answer right away. Her gaze was fixed on the far end of the range, a row of steel targets barely visible beyond the dust, the furthest one sitting at 1,000 meters. "I'm here to shoot, sir." Her voice was calm. Too calm. Some of the nearby operators chuckled. One of them, Staff Sergeant Harlow, a Delta sniper with more years in the field than most recruits had been alive, smirked and called out, "That target's 1,000 meters, rookie." "You sure you brought the right rifle?" Laughter rippled through the group. Ava didn't respond. She simply picked up her M201, an enhanced sniper rifle, adjusted the bipod, and laid flat against the ground. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "You realize this is a volunteer challenge, right? Not part of a test." "I know, sir," she said, sliding the bolt open and checking the chamber. "Permission to engage?" Ramirez exchanged glances with Harlow, who shrugged. "Sure, kid. If you hit that, lunch is on me." The wind was picking up, a steady left-to-right crosswind, enough to send even a skilled sniper off target. The heat shimmered off the sand, making the air dance. Every shooter knew this was a near-impossible shot for a first-timer. Ava adjusted her scope, her movements precise and unhurried. She dialed in the windage, then the elevation, checking her watch twice before taking a slow breath. Around her, the group quieted, not out of respect, but curiosity. Then, crack! The shot broke the silence. The bullet tore through the air, slicing across 1,000 meters of desert wind before colliding with the steel plate. A sharp clang echoed back a full 2 seconds later. The spotting scope confirmed it, dead center. No one spoke. Harlow blinked. Ramirez leaned forward, disbelief flickering across his face. "Hit confirmed." "Center mass," the spotter said, voice uncertain. "One shot." For a moment, it felt like the desert stopped breathing. Ava didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply retracted the bolt, placed the rifle down, and stood. "Request permission to clean my weapon, sir." Ramirez nodded slowly. "Granted." As she walked back toward the tent, Harlow muttered under his breath, "What the hell was that?" "Beginner's luck," another operator said, trying to shake it off. But no one believed it. Later that afternoon, as the range emptied and the soldiers packed up, Ramirez sat in the operations tent, reviewing performance logs. Every recruit had their file listed: shooting accuracy, training background, and clearance status. When he reached Morgan, Ava, PFC, he clicked open her record. Instead of the usual service data, a red message appeared. Access denied. File restricted. TIER1 clearance required. Ramirez frowned. He tried again, using his command credentials. The same message appeared, blinking in bold red. He leaned back, confused. Tier 1 clearance was reserved for Black Ops units, not recruits. Who the hell was this woman? He called up her personnel supervisor in Washington. After several minutes on hold, a female officer finally responded. Major Ramirez, she said flatly. Private Morgan's file is need to know only. She's a recruit, Ramirez replied. She just hit a 1,000-meter shot that none of my men could match. I need to know what I'm dealing with. The line went silent for a moment. Then the voice came back, quieter. Major, my advice? Stop asking. Click. The call ended. Outside, the desert was cooling under a blood-orange sunset. Ava sat alone near the edge of the range, cleaning her rifle piece by piece, as if each motion carried memory. The faint sound of distant thunder rolled over the horizon, or maybe it was another detonation from the live fire drills nearby. Ramirez watched from a distance. He noticed how she aligned her rounds, polished her scope, and reassembled the weapon with near-mechanical precision. He'd seen elite operators do that before, men who'd spent a lifetime training for war. But this, she made it look effortless. He approached quietly. That was an impressive shot, he said. Thank you, sir. Where'd you learn to shoot like that? She paused, eyes on the horizon. Home, sir? Your father teach you? A small flicker of something, pain, maybe, crossed her expression. Yes, before he left. Ramirez nodded, though her tone hinted there was more she wasn't saying. Well, you've got everyone's attention now. Be ready. The brass doesn't like surprises. She met his gaze briefly. Neither do I. That night, the camp was quiet, except for the hum of the generators. In the command tent, Ramirez stared at the restricted notice on his screen, tapping a pencil against the desk. Every instinct told him something was off. In another tent, Ava lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The image of her father flashed in her mind, his voice, calm and steady, teaching her how to breathe through the shot. The target isn't just about aim, Ava, he used to say. It's about patience, control. You don't fire until the world goes silent. And now it had. She reached into her duffel and pulled out a small, worn photograph. Her father in uniform, smiling faintly beside a younger version of herself. She traced the edge of the picture with her thumb, then slid it back into a secret compartment sewn into the bag's lining. Outside, somewhere near the command tent, a phone buzzed. Ramirez picked it up. A low voice spoke from the other end, one he didn't recognize. Major Ramirez? Yes, this is command. About that recruit. Morgan, what about her? Don't assign her to standard drills. Don't question her background. And don't, under any circumstances, share her range data with anyone. Why? Ramirez asked. The voice paused. Because she's not a recruit. She's an evaluation. Click. The line went dead. Ramirez stared at the receiver, a chill running through him, despite the desert heat. Out on the range, under the fading light, Ava Morgan sat sharpening her focus for the next day's trials. Her eyes, calm and cold, reflected the first stars rising over the Arizona sky, the same sky her father once taught her to shoot beneath. Only one thing was certain now. She wasn't there to learn. She was there to be found. The desert morning rose quiet and sharp, like a blade drawn across the horizon. Wind pushed fine dust through the camp, rattling loose canvas and metal trays. Soldiers moved with practiced rhythm, drills, cleaning gear, checking optics, but something felt different that morning. Something had shifted after the shot that shouldn't have been possible. The 1,000-meter miracle, as some were calling it, had become the talk of the entire base. Men who'd seen combat in 3 continents whispered her name as if it were a myth. Morgan, the rookie who outshot Delta. Ava Morgan, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened. She sat cross-legged in the sand beside her rifle case, eyes closed, earphones in. The faint hum of static played from an old recording device she carried, one that looked far too outdated for a soldier's pack. It wasn't music. It was a looped playback of wind direction patterns, frequencies she used to memorize bullet drift. To everyone else, she looked calm. But inside, Ava felt the pull of something she couldn't shake, the creeping sense that someone had noticed too much. Major Cole Ramirez had been in the Army long enough to know when something didn't add up. The shot, the restricted file, the phone call warning him not to ask questions, all of it gnawed at him. He couldn't focus on his drills. That afternoon, he called over his sergeant. "Where's Morgan?" "Sir, she's by the North Ridge, recalibrating optics." Ramirez nodded. "Keep her schedule open after chow. I want a private debrief." When he reached the ridge later, Ava was still there. The wind tugged at her ponytail, and her rifle lay neatly disassembled beside her. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "Major," she greeted softly, standing at attention. "At ease," Ramirez said, removing his sunglasses. "You made quite an impression yesterday." "I didn't mean to, sir." "That's the problem," he said, kneeling near her gear. "That wasn't beginner's luck. That was experience. The kind that doesn't come from basic training." Ava said nothing. Ramirez picked up a bullet casing beside her mat. It was hand-polished, every mark perfectly clean. "You've done this before," he continued, "and not just at the range." Her jaw tightened. "Respectfully, sir, my background is not relevant to today's drills." He gave her a long look. "You're right, but it's relevant to me." He straightened, his voice quieter now. "I tried to open your personnel file. It's restricted above my clearance. Why would an Army private have that level of protection?" Ava turned her gaze toward the far hills. For a moment, Ramirez thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said quietly, "Because I asked for it to be that way." He frowned. "You asked for your file to be classified?" "Yes, sir. Why?" She looked back at him, her eyes steady but distant. "Because my past is a liability. To me. To anyone near me." Before he could respond, the loudspeaker cracked to life, a sharp buzz of the intercom slicing the air. "Attention all personnel. This is command. Marksmanship trials suspended. All recruits report to main tent for briefing." Ramirez motioned for her to follow. "We'll continue this later." Inside the main tent, the atmosphere was heavier than usual. Command officers from Fort Bragg had flown in, their crisp uniforms and unreadable faces, turning the dusty base into something that felt suddenly official. Colonel Reeves, the overseeing officer, stepped up to the podium. "Effective immediately," he announced, "our program will include integrated training between Delta Force and selected recruits. This means new joint exercises, new team pairings, and increased evaluation metrics." The recruits exchanged excited glances, everyone except Ava, who remained expressionless. Ramirez noticed her stillness. It wasn't discipline, it was calculation. When the briefing ended, the colonel called him aside. "Major, I've got one more transfer for your group." "Transfer?" "We're already over capacity." Reeves handed him a sealed folder. "Direct order from JSOC Command. She stays with your team for observation. Treat her as standard personnel." Ramirez opened the folder halfway, just enough to see the name printed in bold. Morgan, Ava, clearance, Shadow Tier. He looked up. "What the hell is Shadow Tier?" Reeves' eyes flicked around, then lowered his voice. You didn't hear that term from me. That evening, the camp quieted again. A distant helicopter rumbled across the horizon, disappearing into the glow of sunset. Inside the mess hall, conversations buzzed around Ava, some curious, others mocking. Bet she's special ops, one soldier whispered. Nah, another replied. Probably some politician's daughter. They always get weird clearances. But no one dared confront her directly. There was something in her presence, a silent confidence that warned them not to pry. Ramirez sat across the hall, pretending to eat, but watching her closely. Every movement, every pause. It was as if she was always listening to something else, something beyond the noise around her. Finally, he stood and walked over. Mind some company? She nodded slightly. You've been quiet today, he said. I usually am. You didn't react much when they announced the new integration program. She took a sip of water, eyes still on her tray. I already knew. Ramirez froze. How? Ava set the cup down carefully. Because they told me before I came here. This assignment was never about training. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Then what was it about? She looked up at him, calm, unblinking. Observation. They wanted to see how you operate. The words hit him like a punch. Me? He repeated. Yes, sir, she said quietly. They're evaluating Delta Force performance under cross-clearance command. I was inserted to record data, reaction time, decision-making, emotional response. Ramirez's mind raced. That's impossible. That would mean that you're being studied too. A silence settled between them. Then she added, softer, You shouldn't dig into my file anymore, Major. You'll only find people who stop answering phones. Ramirez looked at her, realizing the weight behind her tone. This wasn't arrogance. It was warning. Hours later, the camp slept. Only a few guards patrolled under the moonlight. Inside the operations tent, Ramirez sat alone, lit by the dim glow of his laptop. His cursor hovered over her name again. Morgan, Ava, PFC, classified. He hesitated, then tried a different route. Not through personnel logs, but through logistics. Supply routes. Weapon requisitions. He searched her serial number. The result wasn't what he expected. Her issued rifle didn't belong to the Army. It was registered to a contractor unit, a private defense group known internally as Arclight Security. Ramirez frowned. He'd heard that name before, years ago, during a black operation in Kandahar. Arclight had been contracted for covert counterinsurgency work before the project was buried under a classified designation. He checked the associated personnel list. Only a few names remained legible before the rest blurred into redactions. But one name stopped him cold. Morgan Daniel, senior marksman, deceased 2014. His chest tightened. Her father. He clicked the file. It opened briefly before locking again, flashing a final message. Data encrypted, level 9 clearance required. Ramirez leaned back, the pieces falling together too fast to process. The precision shooting, the calm under pressure, the restricted file, the shadow tier clearance. She wasn't some random recruit. She was the daughter of a man whose death had been erased from history. And somehow, she'd found her way back into the same world that killed him. Outside, a faint metallic click sounded, the unmistakable noise of a rifle bolt being checked. Ramirez turned toward the tent flap. Ava stood there in the moonlight, rifle slung over her shoulder. You shouldn't be awake, Major, she said softly. Neither should you, he replied. For a moment, neither moved. Then she added, whatever you think you found. Stop digging. Arclight doesn't exist anymore. But the people who buried it do. She turned to leave. "Ava," he called after her. She paused, half in shadow. "You're not just here for observation, are you?" Her eyes glinted under the dim light. "No, sir. I'm here because someone out there thinks my father left something unfinished." And with that, she disappeared into the dark, leaving Ramirez standing in the cold silence. A truth beginning to take shape, one that could cost them both everything. The wind howled across the mock urban training compound, a cluster of hollow buildings meant to simulate a war-torn city. Broken windows, rusted cars, scattered sandbags. It looked abandoned, but inside, the Delta Force evaluation was underway. Major Cole Ramirez stood near the operations tent, headset on, eyes locked on the live drone feed. "This is just a simulation," he reminded his team. "No live rounds, no heroics. The objective is hostage retrieval, minimal collateral." Across the lot, Ava Morgan adjusted her earpiece, her rifle hanging at her side. She wasn't supposed to be part of this mission. She'd been assigned as an observer, taking notes for cross-unit analysis. But everyone on base knew what that really meant. They were watching her as much as she was watching them. Her presence still made the others uneasy. Some whispered she was CIA. Others thought she was a plant sent to grade Delta performance. Either way, nobody trusted her. Harlow, the veteran sniper who had mocked her during the range test, grinned as he loaded blank rounds. "Hey, rookie," he called out. "Try not to shoot anyone this time, yeah?" Ava didn't even look at him. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I only shoot when I intend to." Ramirez hid a faint smile but didn't intervene. He wanted to see what she'd do under pressure. The simulation began. The Delta Squad advanced through the mock streets, movements fluid and tactical. Smoke canisters created fog-like cover, and holographic hostiles popped up in random windows. Ava stayed behind the command line, monitoring through a digital scope, recording each operative's response time. "Team 1, building clear," came the call. "Team 2, proceeding north," Harlow added, his tone smug. Everything was running smoothly until, without warning, the comms crackled. "Be advised, system malfunction. Target drones in Sector 4 reactivating." "Copy that," Ramirez replied. "Run the override." "Negative. Override's not responding. We've got a sensor glitch. Could trigger crossfire patterns." Ramirez's stomach tightened. "All units, pull back to safe zone." "Repeat, pull back." Before he could finish, the sound of rapid gunfire erupted from inside the compound. Harlow's voice shouted over the comms, "We're taking rounds." "This isn't blanks. Who switched the loadout?" Ramirez froze. "Real bullets." This wasn't part of the exercise. The drone feed flickered, showing muzzle flashes, a chaotic blur of movement. Ramirez grabbed his radio. "Cease fire. Cease fire now." But the system was dead. Comms were down. Without hesitation, Ava grabbed her rifle. "Private Morgan, stand down." Ramirez barked. She didn't listen. She dropped to one knee, scanning through her scope toward the north building. The readouts showed 6 heat signatures, 3 Delta operators, 3 hostile. Her breathing slowed. The chaos faded. The world went quiet. 1 breath. 2 seconds. A line. Crack. A single shot tore through the dust, followed by another. 2 of the hostile signatures vanished instantly. Through the drone camera, Ramirez saw the unbelievable. A rookie had just taken out 2 moving targets, mid-sprint, from 400 meters in less than 3 seconds. "Jesus Christ," one of the techs muttered. Before the team could react, Ava adjusted position again, sliding prone in the dirt. "Harlow, duck!" She shouted into the static-filled mic. He dropped instinctively. A bullet shattered the wall inches above his head, an enemy round that would have killed him. Ava returned fire, her shot punching through a narrow crack in the concrete. Third hostile down. Silence fell. Then the system alarms blared red. Simulation terminated. Minutes later, the compound buzzed with disbelief. Tech officers rushed in to verify the data. Every sensor confirmed it. Her shots had been perfect. Ramirez stormed over, trying to contain his own shock. "What the hell was that, Morgan? You disobeyed a direct order." "I neutralized live threats," she said evenly, setting her rifle down. "You had men about to die. You were told to observe." "And I did," she replied. "I observed poor cover, flawed communication, and a compromised safety system." Her words hit hard. The other soldiers glared, insulted. But none could argue with what just happened. Ramirez leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You could have killed a friendly." Her expression didn't change. "No, sir. I don't miss." The arrogance stung him. Or maybe it wasn't arrogance at all. Maybe it was something else. A fact. That night, Ramirez filed his report. He described the malfunction, the live ammunition, the casualties avoided. When he reached the section on Ava Morgan, he hesitated. How could he write that she'd saved 3 of his best soldiers in a test that should have been fake? He typed slowly. Private Morgan displayed exceptional marksmanship and reaction control under live fire conditions. Her performance prevented potential fatalities. Further assessment recommended. He paused, then added a line that wasn't required. This soldier is not standard. Recommend deeper background verification. When he hit send, his computer flickered, then went black. He frowned, trying to reboot it. After a moment, the screen glowed again, but a new window appeared. Access revoked, user locked out. A chill ran through him. Someone had intercepted his report. At 0200 hours, Ramirez woke to a noise outside his quarters. Faint footsteps, deliberate, controlled. He reached for his sidearm and peered through the tent flap. Ava was standing by the perimeter fence, alone, staring out into the desert. He approached quietly. "Couldn't sleep?" She didn't look back. "I don't sleep much. Because of today?" "Because of the past," she said softly. "This isn't the first time a simulation went wrong." Ramirez frowned. "You mean?" She turned then, eyes glinting in the low light. "There was an operation. Years ago. My father was part of it. Arclight Security ran the drills. They said it was a system test, just like this one. But the targets weren't simulated. They were real." Her voice wavered, barely audible. "That's how he died." Ramirez studied her face, calm, but broken underneath. "So you joined the army to find out the truth?" She nodded. "I joined because someone covered it up. I need to know who." Before he could answer, headlights appeared in the distance, black SUVs rolling toward the base. Ava's demeanor shifted instantly. "They're here for me," she said quietly. "How do you know?" "Because I wasn't supposed to shoot today." The vehicle stopped near the command tent. 2 men stepped out, wearing suits, not uniforms. Ramirez's gut twisted. CIA or JSOC, it didn't matter. One of them handed a folder to the base commander, who immediately pointed toward Ava's barracks. Ramirez intercepted them. "What's this about?" "Transfer order," one of the men said curtly. "Private Morgan is being reassigned to Virginia for debrief." "She's in the middle of evaluation," Ramirez argued. "Not anymore." He looked at Ava. "You knew this was coming." She gave a faint nod. "They don't like when I improvise." The agents motioned her toward the vehicle. Before she climbed in, she turned to Ramirez. "You're not done with this either, Major." "What's that supposed to mean?" She gave a half smile, the first he'd seen from her. "You asked who I was. You'll find out soon enough." Then the door shut, and the SUVs drove off into the night, leaving a trail of dust hanging in the desert air. Ramirez stood there long after they vanished. When he finally returned to his tent, his laptop had rebooted on its own. A single new message glowed on the screen. No sender, no timestamp. Observation concluded. Phase 2 initiated, subject relocated. He stared at the words, a cold realization sinking in. She wasn't just a recruit. She was part of something far bigger, and whatever that was, it had just begun. The black SUV cut through the Virginia night, its headlights slicing across the fog-drenched highway. Inside, Ava Morgan sat silently, hands cuffed, eyes fixed on the distant glow of Langley's skyline. The agents flanking her said nothing. Only the rhythmic hum of the tires filled the air. She wasn't frightened, not anymore. She'd expected this since the moment she pulled the trigger during the failed simulation. The way the Delta base had gone dark, the report erased, the unmarked vehicles arriving without warning, it all fit a pattern she'd studied before. Her father had told her once, when the truth threatens the system buries the truth. They'd buried him. Now they were trying to bury her too. Hours later, she was escorted into a windowless room, somewhere deep beneath the Langley training annex. The air was cold, sterile. A single camera watched from the corner. A tall man in his 50s entered. No insignia, no visible rank. His voice was calm, too calm. Private Morgan. Or should I say, Ava Carson? She looked up sharply. That name, her real name, hadn't been used in years. Interesting background, the man continued, setting a file on the table. Born at Fort Bragg. Father, Captain Michael Carson. Special Activities Division. Officially Kier during a training accident in 2011. He leaned in slightly. But you already know that wasn't an accident, don't you? Ava's pulse quickened, but her face remained composed. If you know who I am, then you also know why I'm here. He smirked. To expose the truth? Or to finish what your father started? Maybe both. He studied her for a moment, then opened the file. Inside were photos, satellite shots, surveillance stills, and one image that made Ava's stomach twist. It was her father alive, taken after his supposed death. Where did you get this? She demanded. From a source who shouldn't exist, he said. We intercepted chatter suggesting he was taken alive, part of an operation gone dark called Silent Vantage. Her voice was barely a whisper. That's impossible. Not if he knew something worth silencing. He closed the file and sat down opposite her. Here's the offer. You're a gifted marksman, far beyond your rank. You also have access, your father's old data keys, his archived mission reports. We want you to find out what he knew, and why his team vanished. Ava frowned. Who's we? The man smiled faintly. We don't have a name. Let's just say we work between the cracks. He stood, walking toward the door. You'll be transferred to a covert operations unit. You'll have full clearance and a handler. But if you disappear, nobody will come looking. You understand what that means? I understand, she said coldly. When do I start? 3 days later, she found herself at Camp Archangel, a covert testing facility buried in the Shenandoah wilderness. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it trained the best. Operators who vanished from the books, men and women erased from the system. Ava was assigned a new identity and issued a high-precision AXMC sniper platform with experimental smart optics. The weapon recognized her grip and adjusted calibration automatically. Her handler, Lieutenant Marcus Vance, was a hard-eyed veteran with Delta scars and a calm, analytical voice. You're not here to prove anything, he said during their first briefing. You're here to find what's missing. Operation Silent Vantage was more than a failed mission. It was a cover operation for something deeper, What was the mission? Ava asked. Vance handed her a drive. Reconnaissance in northern Syria, 2011. Objective was a private military research site run by a defense contractor called ArcLight Systems. Your father's team was supposed to extract a scientist who went rogue. Instead, they vanished. ArcLight said insurgents hit them, but there's no record of any attack. Ava clenched her fists. So they lied. Maybe, Vance said, watching her reaction. Or maybe your father found something that made him go dark. He paused. You'll deploy with a small detachment. No insignia, no digital trace. You find that site. You find what's left of Silent Vantage. The next evening, their transport touched down in Jordan under the cover of a humanitarian flight. From there, they moved covertly across the border into northern Syria. The air smelled of dust and diesel. Burnt-out vehicles littered the roads, and the distant rumble of artillery rolled through the valleys. Vance led the team through the ruins of an abandoned industrial park. ArcLight's lab should have been here, he said, scanning a handheld sensor. But according to the satellite feed, it's gone. Ava adjusted her scope. Through the haze, she spotted something. A structure half buried in sand. Its roof collapsed, but its foundation intact. There, she said. They moved closer, carefully. Inside, the air was heavy with decay. Old computer racks stood silent, their screens shattered. Scorch marks lined the walls. Then Ava saw it, a faded stencil on the far panel. Project Silent Vantage, property of ArcLight Defense. Her heart pounded. This was it. The last place her father was seen alive. They began collecting data, drives, papers, anything salvageable. As Ava pried open a storage locker, a small case fell out. Inside was a data card labeled with a single word, Phase 2. She inserted it into her tablet. The screen flickered to life, displaying encrypted files and fragments of a video feed. The video was grainy, time-stamped April 4th, 2011. It showed her father's team, 5 men, all in ArcLight uniforms. Then, static. A voice echoed through the speaker, her father's voice. This isn't a research site. It's a weapons prototype lab. They're testing remote target neural control. We're shutting it down before it gets out. A sudden gunshot cracked in the video. Chaos. Screams. The feed cut out. Ava's hand trembled. He tried to stop them. Before she could process more, Vance's radio hissed. Contact incoming vehicles. East Ridge. Unmarked trucks. Move. He shouted. The team scrambled for cover as headlights swept the ruins. Armed men poured out, black-clad, silent, no insignias. ArcLight's private security. Gunfire erupted. Ava dropped prone behind a steel beam, her rifle steady. She spotted the first hostile through the dust. One shot, clean. Then another. Her mind went still, her body mechanical. She wasn't fighting for the mission anymore. She was fighting for the truth. But there were too many. Fall back, Vance ordered. They're sweeping the flank. Ava fired again, covering the retreat. As she turned, a blast ripped through the corridor. The shockwave threw her backward, slamming her into the wall. Her ears rang. Everything spun. Through the smoke, she saw Vance dragging her toward the exit. We've got what we came for. He yelled, Go! They stumbled out into the cold night, just as the compound exploded behind them. A fireball lighting up the valley. Hours later, in a safe house near the border, Ava sat in silence, blood dried on her hands. The data card lay on the table between them. Vance leaned back, exhausted. Whatever's on that drive? Someone just killed to protect it. Ava stared at the card, eyes cold and determined. Then we make sure it was worth the cost. He studied her quietly. "You're not doing this for the army anymore, are you?" She looked up. "No, I'm doing this for my father." Outside, the first light of dawn broke across the desert. The mission was over, but the war for the truth had only just begun. The safe house was silent, except for the faint hum of the cooling fan in the encrypted laptop. The desert wind outside rattled the shutters, carrying sand through the cracks like whispers of unfinished stories. Ava Morgan sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes fixed on the flickering data screen. The Phase 2 drive was finally running a decryption sequence, courtesy of the field software Lieutenant Vance had smuggled from Langley's archives. Lines of code scrolled down the display like rain. 87%, 92%, 100%. The laptop beeped softly. Then a new folder appeared. Silent_Vantage, debrief, audio_logs. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the first file. The recording began with static, then a voice, low, familiar. Captain Michael Carson, Mission Log, April 2nd, 2011. Operation Silent Vantage. We were told to secure data from ArcLight's Remote Weapons Division, but intel was wrong. They're developing neural link targeting, technology that syncs directly to a sniper's brainwave patterns. They call it the Eye of God. Ava froze. Neural link targeting. It wasn't science fiction anymore. It was a weapon system that could eliminate targets across miles, guided by thought alone. Her father's voice continued, slower now, as if he knew the recording might be his last. ArcLight isn't building it for defense. They're selling it. Rogue buyers, governments, private warlords. Someone inside our command is protecting them. If this message is found, trust no one, not even Delta. Ava's throat tightened. Not even Delta. Vance, standing behind her, exhaled sharply. Your father was running a whistle operation. He knew too much. Ava looked up at him, her expression unreadable. He didn't die in an ambush. He was silenced. Vance nodded grimly. And whoever's behind ArcLight still has clearance high enough to wipe an entire mission off record. Ava's eyes hardened. Then we hit them where it hurts, the data. For the next several hours, they worked through every fragment of the recovered drive. Among corrupted files and encrypted reports, Ava found coordinates tagged under Eye of God Beta Test. The location was shocking. White Sands, New Mexico. Inside the continental United States. They brought it home, she whispered. They're testing it here. Vance rubbed his temples. Which means every major agency is either complicit or blind. He turned toward her. Ava, listen to me. You can't take this on alone. If we go public with this data, they'll kill us before it leaves the server. She stared out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. My father didn't die to keep this buried. I won't either. That night, as Vance slept, Ava sat alone by the faint glow of her rifle's scope. She replayed the mission log again and again, her father's voice looping in her head. Trust no one, not even Delta. She couldn't shake the thought. Someone inside Delta Force, someone she'd trained beside, had been part of it. Her memory drifted to the range at Bragg, to the faces watching her during that 1,000-meter shot. One of them, Major Cole Ramirez, the man who defended her, questioned her, and filed the report that mysteriously vanished hours later. Her gut twisted. Had he known? Or was he another pawn? She opened her secure satellite uplink, bypassing the encryption firewalls. A coded message flashed across the screen. FROM. Unknown node access granted. We know what you found. Stop digging. Phase 3 begins at dawn. Iva's heart stopped for a second. They were already ahead of her. By morning, the safe house was no longer safe. A convoy of unmarked vehicles approached from the south. Dust trails rising in the horizon. No insignias, No radio signals. Vance woke to Ava loading her rifle. How long do we have? 10 minutes, maybe less. Backup? None. He nodded grimly, grabbing his carbine. Then we make them earn it. The first explosion hit the outer wall, a shockwave that blew sand through the cracks. Ava ducked, rolled, and took position by the window. Through her scope, she counted at least 15 men, advancing in formation. She adjusted for wind, exhaled, and fired. The first hostile dropped instantly. Vance moved to the opposite side, returning bursts of suppressive fire. They're Arclight's retrieval team. He shouted. They're not here to retrieve. They're here to erase. Ava replied, firing again. The firefight roared across the barren valley, bullets shredding the old plaster walls. The safe house trembled with every hit. Then, through the chaos, Ava saw a face she recognized. A tall operative, scar across his jaw, wearing the same patch as Delta's forward recon units. Her breath caught. That's impossible. Who? Vance asked, firing another burst. That's Harlow, she said quietly, the same sniper who'd mocked her at Bragg. What's he doing here? Following orders, she muttered. From whoever's pulling the strings. They couldn't hold out much longer. Vance grabbed the encrypted laptop, slinging it into a tactical pack. We have to move North Ridge now. Ava fired one last shot, clearing their path, then sprinted out the back as the safe house erupted in flames. The desert wind carried embers into the night sky. They ran through the rocky gulch, hearts pounding. Distant engines roared behind them. When they reached the ridge, Ava turned, scanning the burning ruins below. She spotted Harlow again, standing by a vehicle, shouting into a radio. Their eyes met through the distance, sniper to sniper. He raised his weapon. She dropped flat, aimed, and fired. The bullet struck the rifle in his hands, shattering it. Not a kill, a warning. Then she disappeared over the ridge with Vance. By dawn, they reached an extraction point, an old airfield, abandoned and forgotten. A friendly contact from Vance's past, Sergeant Elena Ruiz, waited with a small twin-engine plane. You look like hell, she said, eyes darting to the smoke still rising from the horizon. Long night, Vance replied. We need this in D.C. immediately. Ava climbed aboard, clutching the laptop. We're not going to D.C., she said flatly. Vance turned, confused. Then where? White Sands, she said. Where it all began. Where it ends. Vance hesitated. You really think we can take on Arclight alone? Ava looked out at the rising sun. Not alone, she said softly. My father started this fight. I'm going to finish it. As the plane lifted off the cracked runway, the desert stretched endlessly below them, vast, silent, and filled with buried secrets. In the distance, through the thin layer of dawn fog, Ava could almost swear she saw a figure standing on a dune ridge, watching. A silhouette in tactical gear, tall, familiar. For a moment she dared to hope. Was it him? Then the figure vanished with the shifting wind. The truth was now closer than ever, and far more dangerous than she'd imagined. Because buried deep in that data drive wasn't just proof of her father's disappearance. It was the blueprint of a weapon that could change warfare forever, and she was the only person alive who knew how to stop it. The desert of White Sands, New Mexico, shimmered like glass under the punishing midday sun. Miles of pale dunes stretched in every direction, swallowing the horizon. It was silent, too silent for a military test site rumored to host the most advanced weapon in U.S. history. Ava Morgan crouched beside Lieutenant Marcus Vance, their desert camo blending perfectly with the terrain. The small reconnaissance drone hummed faintly above them, feeding live video to her wrist display. There, Vance said, pointing toward the cluster of low buildings half buried in the sand. That's not an old test range. That's an operational facility. Ava zoomed in. High-security fencing. Thermal towers. Armed patrols in black tactical armor. No insignias. Arclight's private military. Her pulse quickened. This was it. The place where her father's mission had ended, and where hers would, one way or another, begin. They descended under cover of dusk, moving silently across the dunes. The wind carried fine dust that masked their tracks. Ava's mind was sharp, focused, a sniper's calm she'd been trained for. Vance whispered through the comms, "Our entry point is the west maintenance shaft. 2-minute patrol rotation." "Copy," she murmured. They reached the perimeter fence. Vance disabled the motion sensors while Ava scanned through her scope. 2 guards, one stationary, one moving. "One on the right," she whispered. Vance nodded. "On my mark. 1, 2, 3. Her suppressed shot cracked softly. The guard dropped before his radio hit the sand. Vance dragged the body into the shadows. They slipped inside. The underground tunnels smelled of oil and dust. Fluorescent lights flickered above long corridors, lined with warning labels. Authorized personnel only, Project Eye of God, Level 7 security clearance. Every step they took. Ava felt her heartbeat sink with a distant mechanical hum echoing from deep within the complex. They stopped at a heavy blast door. Vance hacked into the console, overriding the biometric lock. The door hissed open. Inside was a chamber that didn't look human. Rows of curved glass pods lined the walls, each containing a neural interface helmet connected to a rifle simulator. In the center, a holographic model floated in the air, a human brain mapped with red threads connecting to targeting vectors. "The Eye of God," Vance whispered. Ava stepped closer, awe and dread mixing in her chest. "They've built it, exactly as he described." She touched the console. A new file appeared. Subject, CO1 Carson Michael, her father's name. The file opened automatically. Video feed. Date, June 3, 2011. It showed a man strapped to one of the neural pods, exhausted, bruised. Wires connected from his skull to the system. Her father. Ava's breath caught. Subject remains unresponsive to neural feedback. "Recommend termination after Phase 1 results are extracted," said a voice off-screen. Then another voice, strained but defiant, her father's. "You think you can control the human mind? You're playing God." The camera panned. Standing across from him was a man in uniform, clean-cut, sharp eyes. The badge on his chest read, Cole Ramirez. Ava's entire body froze. Vance stared at the screen, disbelief in his eyes. "Ramirez. Your commanding officer?" She couldn't speak. Her mind reeled, memories crashing together. His kindness at the range, his concern, his subtle warnings. He hadn't been protecting her. He'd been watching her. On screen, Ramirez leaned forward. "You were a patriot, Captain Carson. But your idealism got in the way. The future of warfare doesn't wait for permission." Her father spat blood. "Then you'll burn with it." The video cut to static. Ava stumbled back, breath shallow. He killed him. Vance grabbed her arm. "Ava, listen. We don't know that for sure." But she wasn't listening anymore. Rage burned in her chest, hot and sharp. The man she'd trusted, the officer who'd questioned her, guided her, had been part of her father's death. She looked up at the hologram again. They didn't just build a weapon. They built control. And now he's running it. Vance's comms crackled suddenly, faint static followed by a cold voice. "I knew you'd find this place, Ava." It was Ramirez. Ava froze. "Where are you?" "Closer than you think." The lights went out. Sirens flared. Red emergency lights bathed the room. You were supposed to die in Syria, Ramirez's voice continued. But you're your father's daughter. Stubborn, righteous, dangerous. Ava raised her rifle, scanning the shadows. You murdered him. No, Ramirez said calmly. He volunteered. He believed we could save lives, eliminate war through precision. The system only fires when certainty reaches 100%. The perfect weapon. No emotion. No error. Then why did he resist? Because he realized perfection requires sacrifice. A door opened behind them, heavy boots echoing. Vance swung his carbine, covering the entrance. A figure stepped into the red light. Ramirez alive, dressed in black combat armor, a sidearm holstered casually. He looked at Ava like a disappointed teacher. You shouldn't have come here. You made sure I did, she shot back. You erased my report. You lured me here. He nodded slightly. Because I needed proof the system works. Your father's neural profile was incomplete. His daughter's, however. Her blood ran cold. You want me to finish his project? Ramirez smiled. You already have. That 1,000-meter shot at Bragg? You triggered the dormant code when the system scanned your optics. You've been sensed ever since. Ava's hands trembled. You used me. Vance stepped between them. You're not taking her. Ramirez didn't flinch. You think this is about taking her? She's already connected. The eye responds to her now. He raised a small handheld trigger. The console behind Ava surged with light. The holographic system came alive, locking onto her biosignature. Target link. Ava Carson active. Ava gasped as pain shot through her skull, like electricity behind her eyes. The neural link pulsed red, connecting her to the weapon system. Vance lunged forward, tackling Ramirez. The trigger flew from his hand, skidding across the floor. Ava, disconnected. He shouted. She stumbled toward the console, vision blurring. The interface flashed warnings in red text. Link unstable. Feedback imminent. Her father's voice echoed in her head. Not a memory, but a recording embedded in the data. If you ever find this system, destroy it. Don't let it control you. Gritting her teeth, Ava grabbed the data core and ripped it free. Sparks flew. The entire chamber shook. Ramirez slammed Vance against the wall, drawing his sidearm. You have no idea what you've done. He shouted. Ava turned toward him, the glowing drive in her hands. Neither do you. She hurled it at the console. It shattered on impact. The lights exploded into white brilliance. A blinding pulse filled the room, followed by silence. When Ava opened her eyes, the facility was burning. Vance was dragging her toward the exit, coughing through the smoke. Ramirez lay motionless on the ground, the neural device fried beside him. Outside, the night air hit like ice. The desert stretched under a sky full of stars. Ava collapsed to her knees, trembling. It's over. Vance shook his head. No, that wasn't the whole system. He said phase 3. That means there's another prototype. She looked up at him, eyes hollow but fierce. Then we find it. He nodded. Together. Behind them, the underground complex erupted, a pillar of flame rising into the night. The sound rolled across the desert like distant thunder, the end of one secret and the birth of another. In Washington, D.C., miles away, a man in a dark suit watched the explosion feed from a satellite monitor. Project Eye of God destroyed, an aide reported. The man smiled faintly. Good. Then we move to the next phase. He typed a command on his tablet. The screen flashed. Phase 3 target acquisition. Morgan. Ava. The burn scar in Ava's lungs tasted like rust and ozone. For a long moment after the explosion, all that existed was the raw, metallic press of air, and the distant keening of alarms swallowed by sand. The underground complex had been a furnace. Now it was a crater, black smoke ribboning into the star-filled desert sky. They had destroyed one heart of the machine, but the machine still had teeth. Lieutenant Marcus Vance crouched beside Ava, coughing. He checked her for wounds with mechanical hands, practiced and merciless. "You good?" he rasped. Ava swallowed. Her vision still shimmered from the neural feedback, phantom pulses trailing her sight like afterimages. "I'm okay," she said. The lie was an honest one. She had survived. So had something else, a fact that settled over them both like frost. Someone already had Phase 3 mapped and tagged. They'd been a step ahead even before White Sands burned. They moved through the dunes on foot until the first pale light of dawn softened the edges of the world. Extraction was a non-option. The skies were full of satellites, and more than one agency would have the feeds. Instead, they headed for a line of scrub pines where Elena Ruiz had told them a contact lived, an off-grid mechanic who owed her a favor. The mechanic, an old man with oil under his nails and a grin gone soft with age, did not ask questions. He slid them into the belly of an old diesel truck and hauled them north, away from White Sands, away from burning memory. He left them at a derelict farmhouse and told them to stay put until night. Ghost protocol. Elena had called it hours earlier, in the whispering dark as the first sirens receded. If they think the facility is gone, they'll hunt the obvious places first. Ghost protocol is vanish. No transmissions. No trails. Move only when the dust settles. Ava listened, but vanishing was not the same as disappearing. She had the drive fragments, the burned cores she'd ripped from the console, and the knowledge of where the eye had been built. Someone out there had typed her name into a classified tablet and watched the globe for the explosion. Whoever that was had resources. Whoever that was also wanted her, dead or alive. Night fell like a curtain. Vance and Ava moved again, each step measured, each breath a calculation. Their destination, a tiny, clandestine archive in Denver, a contractor's off-book server farm where redundant backups sometimes ended up after ventilated projects were shuttered. Vance had a contact there, a woman who trafficked in ghost files and gray money. If anyone had told someone about Phase 3 before White Sands blew, it would be there. They reached the server farm under the cover of fog. The woman, quiet, efficient, known only as Mara, regarded Ava with the same sharp curiosity she'd shown at Camp Archangel. "You know this will put a bullseye on you," Mara said as she plugged the burned data cores into a Faraday-caged reader. "I know," Ava answered. "And we don't have time for caution." Mara's fingers danced over the keys. The cores spat fragments into the monitor. Wiring diagrams, shipment manifests, a partial ledger listing Eagle Fall interim facility with coordinates. The coordinates translated to a high plateau tucked inside the Rockies, an inconspicuous Department of Energy testing range with a black site appended deep beneath its surface. The file header was stamped with the contractor's logo, ArcLight Integrated Systems Black Projects. Vance swore low. "Eagle Fall," he breathed. The name matched a whisper Marcus had heard years before while pulling teeth for unlisted intel, a place where prototypes went to die and where policy went to sleep. Mara looked up, eyes flat. "You go there, you will meet more than contractors. You will meet men who wear government uniforms and private logos at once. People who keep two sets of accounts. People who will not hesitate." Ava slung her rifle. "Then we don't meet them in their strong rooms. We draw them into daylight." They planned like thieves. A small assault team, 2, maybe 3, who could slip past perimeter patrols, find the vault, and pull the core evidence. No reinforcements, No radio chatter that could be traced. Ghost protocol was not flight. It was surgical disappearance with purpose. Take the last piece and give it to the public, to press, to a hack that would leak everything at once. The approach to Eagle Fall was wrong for a cavalry charge. The plateau was a sterile expanse of engineered scrub and gravel, official vehicles and concrete outbuildings arranged like a campus. But at night, the glow of towers made the site look like some mechanical constellation. Ava crawled through her optic feed and counted rotations. Patrols were regular, predictable, bored. They were efficient, trained to spot the obvious, not the invisible. She picked the high ground with Vance at her side. "We go in at 2 o'clock, she whispered. "Timing will be everything." She had not yet told Vance about Ramirez's face on that 2011 video. There was a gravity in her chest that had nothing to do with the weapon's pulse. Betrayal. A man she had trusted had been a hand on the switchboard. The thought made her fingers itch with old lightning. At 0130 hours, they made their move. Slipping through a service gap in the fence, they ghosted under floodlights and around sleeping sentries. Ava's heartbeat was a metronome. But as they neared the underground access, a maintenance hatch behind a weathered generator, Vance's cum crackled. "Unmarked vehicle approaching from the east," the voice said. Old, tired. Not a guard. A static voice from a receiver someone else was using. The tone was a whisper of impatience, like a laced glove on a table. 2-man team in perimeter. "Confirm?" Ava's breath caught. They'd been made. Eyes from somewhere on the plateau swung toward their direction like knives. "Move!" Vance hissed. They ran. The hatch was closed, sealed, then budged with a crowbar in brute force. Inside, a long concrete stairwell smelled of coolant and old grease. The sublevel was a maze of tunnels and maintenance, corridors that eventually led to a vault door stamped with the same arc-light symbol. Ava set the charges with hands that didn't shake. The explosives a simple script. Blast the lock, not the core. She thought of her father strapped to a pod, the grainy video of Ramirez's face, the way the system had wanted control more than truth. As the charges went, alarms flared above. Flashing red lights painted the corridor in violent stripes. The vault door screamed open. Inside, racks of storage, data cores glowing in their cradles, and a bank of neural pods, a smaller, newer reproduction of the Eye of God, polished and humming like some sleeping animal. Vance moved methodically, ripping free drives while Ava covered the entrance with her rifle. On the far bank, a single pod was occupied, a figure slumped inside, face half-shadowed. For one terrible heartbeat, Ava believed she saw her father's silhouette. Then the figure stirred, head lifting to reveal a scarred jaw and a set of eyes she'd seen before. Harlow. He was alive, in a pod, wired to the system. "Harlow?" Ava whispered, shock collapsing into rage. At that moment, the vault door slammed shut behind them. Heavy boots fell in cadence like thunder. Voices barked and clipped commands, but the language had a cold officialness. JSOC. And then, his voice, filtered, near and terrible. "You picked the wrong nest, Private." Ava's gun swept. The room tightened with motion. Men in tactical armor flowed through the breach, shields raised, smoke canisters already deploying. Vance threw a smoke grenade to mask their movements. But the smoke was a curtain both ways. It hid them, and it hid the men coming in. They fought for the core, hands scrabbling for drives. For anything that proved the Eye of God's lineage. Not just the hardware, but the ledgers. The purchase orders, the names that matched Tyler's ledger. Ramirez's signature on a transfer. A voice on an open channel barked, "Stand down. You are under orders of the department." But orders could be masks painted in black. The men who came took their orders from someone who could bend law like wire. In the firefight, Ava made a decision. She let go of the plan to extract everything whole. She jammed a handful of drives into her pack, took the one pod with Harlow's data core, and banged a thermal charge against the pod bank. The explosion didn't kill the facility. It ruptured an artery. It forced a choice: secure the site or secure the detainees. They ran. When they burst out into the night again, hands raw and lungs burning, the plateau behind them was a tableau of flares and shouting men. The last thing Ava saw before they disappeared down a service road into the dark was a figure on the ridge, backlit, alone, hand raised, a silhouette she now knew too well. Major Cole Ramirez stood watching the smoke. He turned his head as the two figures dropped from his sight without moving. He smiled once, small and sealed, and spoke into a pocket radio. Proceed to Phase 3. They would be hunted. Of that Ava had no doubt. The drive she carried would be worth more than any payroll call or safe house. But she had what her father had started: fragments of truth heavy enough to sink a ship. The question was how to set those fragments afloat where the public could see them before the people who had called her name into a classified tablet could call it off. Vance looked at her through the rear window of the stolen pickup, diesel taste in his mouth, and said, "We go to ground. We find allies. We make noise." Ava looked up through the glass at the receding plateau. The wind tasted like old metal. "We make them remember," she said. Behind them, in a dark room somewhere, a man in a suit tapped the last entry into a classified ledger and underlined one word: Eagle Fall secured. Below it, smaller, a new line of text: Phase V4 cleanup. Target: Morgan, Ava. The hunt now had a name. The ghost protocol was over, and the chase had only begun. They brought her into the room without fanfare, a windowless chamber ringed by gray chairs and faces that were intentionally unremarkable. The lighting was neutral. The air smelled faintly of ozone and coffee that had long since gone cold. There were no insignias on the table, no flags on the walls. The men and women who sat there had names on electronic placards, not faces. They spoke in procedural tones, the kind that came from people whose job it was to tidy history into approved shapes. Ava walked in with a tactical pack slung over one shoulder, dust crusted at the cuffs of her jacket, and a bundle of drives heavy in her hands. Lieutenant Marcus Vance walked in behind her, bruised but steady. They had spent the last weeks running through deserts and server farms, stealing shards of a truth someone wanted buried. Now those shards sat between them, and a set of faces that would decide what to do with what they'd taken. The lead analyst introduced himself as chairman. He spoke without preamble. "Ms. Morgan, thank you for coming. Your actions were irregular. You understand the implications." The rest of the room watched like weather. Ava set the drives on the table like an offering. "This is everything we pulled from Eagle Fall and White Sands," she said. "It proves Project Eye of God existed. It proves Arclight built a neural targeting linkage for small arms. It proves high-ranking officers were involved in the prototype's testing, including a man named Cole Ramirez." She held his name like a detonator. The room didn't flinch. Its lack of surprise was worse than shock. Silence stretched. Then a woman in her 50s, the only person who had refused to hide behind technology, leaned forward. "We have that name," she said, "and we have corroborative data. But public disclosure would destabilize operations and foreign partnerships. We must be measured." "You mean we must hide it?" Ava snapped. "You mean you'll let them keep building a weapon that can strip a man's free will because it's politically inconvenient to stop them?" Her voice had an edge of the desert in it, sharp and dry. A murmur went around the room, not of disagreement, but of obligation. This was the machinery of realpolitik. Everything weighed against everything else. Lives, contracts, doctrine. Vance, who had kept his anger buried under a professional mask, spoke up. You can't keep this in-house. Ramirez isn't the only one. If you seal this, you create precedent. Weaponized mind control, privatized warfare without public oversight. People will die because you chose comfort over accountability. One of the chairs, a man who'd been silent until then, tapped a command into a tablet. A single frame appeared on the wall. A burned, grainy video clip they'd recovered. The last file their enemies hadn't entirely destroyed. For a beat, Ava saw her father move again on the projector, raw and real, addressing a camera as if he knew it might be his last testament. Captain Michael Carson, her father said on the screen. His voice was thin, haunted, but clear. If you're watching this, it means I failed to stop them. The technology is real. It is a weapon that makes soldiers into instruments. If you don't see this, if they bury it, know this. Whoever controls a man's aim controls his choices. You must not let them take that power. The room watched. Not a single person moved. The chairman's fingers hovered over his tablet. Ava felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel since White Sands. The old, aching absence that had been her father. It rose inside her, equal parts grief and iron. She let it rise. He didn't die in a firefight, she said. He was punished for trying to stop this. Her voice was quieter now, but cut like glass. I'm not asking you for revenge. I'm asking you to do the right thing. The chairwoman, the woman who'd leaned forward earlier, looked directly at Ava. We can bring prosecutions, she said slowly. We can name people, hold hearings, let the public decide. Or we can withhold the technical data, shut down contracts, and quietly dissolve ArcLight's access to government projects. It's messy her way. Vance's jaw clenched. Messy means safer in your office. People who built this won't go quietly. But going public also means adversaries seize the technology. It's not a clean line, Lieutenant, she answered. We weigh. Ava slammed her hand on the table. The sound echoed, and for a moment, the clinical calm in the room faltered. Stop weighing, she said. If you know who signed off on human experimentation, you have an obligation. We're not talking about trade secrets. We're talking about the right to think without being a weapon. Someone in the back of the room, a younger analyst who had been silent until now, swallowed and leaned forward. What if we leak it to an independent outlet? A full data dump with redundancy across global networks? If the public sees it, oversight will be forced. The idea hung between them, dangerous, messy, impossible to unsay. The chairman exhaled. Leaking is an act of war, he said. It could destabilize alliances and open legal no man's lands. Then maybe the law needs disturbing, Ava said. Because the law is on its knees if a weapon like that exists without consent. The silence that followed was not empty. It was a pressure chamber where the world was being decided, one option weighing against another. The chairwoman looked at the drives. She looked at Ava. Then she looked at the file on Ramirez, and for a heartbeat, only a heartbeat, the room looked like it might tilt. Finally, she nodded. We'll convene an independent inquiry. Not in secret, but with oversight. We will name a task force, grant whistleblower protections, and temporarily freeze ArcLight's contracts pending the inquiry. Ava had expected less. She had expected worse. It was not absolution. It was a beginning. And Ramirez? She asked. The chairwoman's eyes were inscrutable. We'll address culpability as the inquiry dictates. Nobody is above the law. Vance stood slowly. And if they try to bury it again? Then we leak, the analyst said softly. And we accept the consequences. Ava gathered the drives, feeling their weight like the weight of a verdict. She'd wanted blood. She'd found process. The world didn't collapse into righteousness in a single night. It inched forward, messy and slow and human. They released a mediated statement the next week, a suspension of certain contracts, an investigation launched into ArcLight and related procurement channels. It was careful, legalistic, and immediately attacked by pundits and lawyers. Somewhere, beneath the rhetoric, men who'd ordered assassinations felt the ground shift under their feet. In the weeks that followed, the inquiry uncovered paper trails, signatures, and excuses. Names that had been redacted for years were unredacted. Testimony whispered across secure rooms, and once powerful figures found themselves summoned to testify. Ramirez, found to have been involved at various degrees, invoked orders and national security. He was contemptuous in a hearing that the press barely described, and he maintained he'd acted to protect American lives. But the data the drives held, the video of Carson, the ledger entries, the shipping manifests, proved impossible to ignore. It forced the government to reckon with the ethics of weapons that reached into the mind. The inquiry recommended decisive action. Criminal referrals were appropriate, the reclassification of neural interface technology, and strict limits on private contractors in lethal programs. ArcLight's contracts were terminated, and its leadership faced prosecution. It was not clean. It was not satisfying. Ramirez disappeared from public record the way some men disappear. Reassigned, quietly retired, a face on a classified list. The press called it a compromise. Ava called it the beginning of accountability. Months later, in a small room with a window that looked out across a scrubbed field, Ramirez sat across from Ava one last time. He was older. The clean-cut line of command softened into something like regret. "You shouldn't have come for vengeance," he said, hands folded. "I didn't come for vengeance," Ava replied. "I came for truth." He stared at her. "Truth is expensive." His voice cracked once. "You cost me everything." "You cost me my father," she said. He closed his eyes. The silence between them had no easy lines. I thought we were building a way to end war. I thought with certainty we could save lives. I was wrong." He looked up then, meeting her gaze fully. "If you ever want a place again, if you ever want to be part of something that actually believes in restraint, there's a spot, quiet, not Delta, not JSOC, somewhere we try not to be gods." Ava considered him. The offer was not a clean pardon. It was an anchor. She thought of desert ridges, of her father's laugh, of Vance's steady presence, of Mara's quiet pragmatism. She thought of the drives slowly being catalogued in evidence rooms, of hearings where men who'd hidden behind secrecy had to look at what they'd done. "No," she said finally. "I can't be part of anything that forgets to ask the hard questions." Her voice was not cruel. It was measured. Ramirez nodded once. "Then go find the people who will ask them anyway." He reached into his coat and slid something across the table. A small flash drive, unmarked. "You should have this." "What's on it?" "I couldn't justify keeping it." "Maybe you can." She accepted it without surprise. Later, alone, she watched the file. It was her father, not the soldier but the man. Laughter, a private joke, a voice steady and honest.